My name is Zachary Miller, 29 years old, and I built my event planning business from nothing after my father cut me off financially when I refused to obey my stepmother, Janet. Years later, at my brother Kyle's wedding that my company was secretly running, my dad called me a disgrace and slapped me in front of 500 guests. I never raised my voice or argued. I simply made one phone call to my team, and we packed up everything. The look on his face when he realized I owned the company was worth every struggle I endured. Before I share how I went from rejected son to successful business owner, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when family lets you down. Growing up, our home was filled with laughter and warmth. My mother, Elizabeth, was the heart of our family, always making our house feel like a sanctuary. She had this incredible ability to make everyday moments feel special, whether it was pancake Sundays or our annual camping trips to Lake Michigan. Dad always Richard to his colleagues, but Richie to Mom worked as a corporate attorney. He traveled often, but made those moments at home count. When he was around, he coached my baseball teams, helped with science projects, and taught me to change oil in our family car. My brother Kyle was born when I was 5. Being the big brother was a responsibility I took seriously from the beginning. I remember holding his tiny hand in the hospital, promising to always protect him. As we grew up, we became inseparable despite the age gap. I taught him how to ride a bike, throw a perfect spiral, and later survive middle school social politics. Everything changed when Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when I was 11. The following 2 years became a blur of hospital visits, whispered conversations between adults, and trying to maintain normalcy for Kyle, who was too young to fully understand what was happening. I grew up fast during those years, learning to cook simple meals, help Kyle with homework, and keep the house running when Dad was at the hospital with Mom. The day Mom died, I was 13 and Kyle was only 8. I remember the silence in our house that evening, how it felt suffocating and endless. Dad shut down emotionally. The man who once filled rooms with his booming laugh became a shadow going through motions of parenting without really being present. For almost 2 years, we lived in this emotional limbo. I stepped up, becoming more parent than brother to Kyle, making sure he did his homework, got to school on time, and had someone to talk to about Mom when the grief hit him in unexpected waves. I was 15 when Janet entered our lives. Dad met her at some corporate function, and suddenly she was everywhere. Looking back, I understand he was desperately lonely, and Janet represented a return to normalcy, a way to fill the void Mom left. But to Kyle and me, it felt like betrayal, especially when they got engaged just 4 months after meeting. Janet moved into our home before the wedding, immediately rearranging furniture and redecorating rooms. The first red flag appeared when she removed all photos of Mom from the living room and hallway, relegating them to our bedrooms because, as she put it, it's unhealthy to dwell on the past. I found Kyle crying in his room that night, clutching Mom's picture to his chest. I tried to accept Janet for Dad's sake. I really did. When she insisted on family dinners where she interrogated us about school and friends, I participated politely. When she implemented new house rules without discussing them with us, first I complied without complaint. I even defended her to Kyle, explaining that she was trying to establish herself in our family and deserved a chance. But Janet never tried to understand who we were or what we had lost. Instead, she seemed determined to erase any trace of our life before her. She referred to herself as Mom from day one, despite our obvious discomfort. When I gently suggested she might give us time to adjust, she told Dad I was being deliberately difficult. As months passed, a pattern emerged. Janet would create rules or expectations. I would question them or suggest compromises, and Dad would side with her, insisting I needed to show respect. Kyle, younger and more adaptable, gradually began to call her Mom and follow her rules without question. I watched my little brother being molded into someone else, losing connections to our mother and our past. High school became my refuge. I threw myself into academics and extracurriculars, finding excuses to stay late at school or study at friends' houses. When I was 17, Janet insisted on reading my text messages and monitoring my computer use because good mothers know what their children are doing. When I refused, citing privacy, she confiscated my phone. Dad supported her decision, saying Janet only wants what's best for you. The college application process became another battlefield. I wanted to apply to schools on both coasts, but Janet insisted I only consider local options so I could live at home. College students waste money and develop bad habits when they live on campus, she declared. Dad once again agreed with her assessment. I applied to my dream schools anyway, using guidance counselors at school to help with paperwork. When acceptance letters arrived, including one from UCLA with a partial scholarship, Janet dismissed it as not good enough and pressured me to attend the state university where she had connections. I chose UCLA, leading to weeks of tension at home. Dad finally agreed to help with tuition, but made it clear he was disappointed in my choice. Those first holidays home from college were tense. Janet had redecorated my bedroom into a home office, moving my remaining belongings to the basement. Kyle, then entering his teenage years, had become increasingly distant, parroting Janet's opinions and avoiding one-on-one time with me. Dad seemed perpetually caught between us, occasionally showing glimpses of his former self when Janet wasn't around, but quickly reverting to her ally when conflicts arose. By sophomore year of college, coming home for breaks became so stressful that I started making excuses to stay on campus or visit friends instead. The divide between us grew wider with each passing month, and I began to accept that the close family I once knew might never exist again. My college years were defined by hustle and determination. The partial scholarship covered about 40% of my tuition, but everything else fell on my shoulders. I worked as a resident advisor to cover housing, took shifts at the campus coffee shop between classes, and picked up weekend gigs with a catering company to pay for books and living expenses. It was at that catering company where I discovered my knack for event planning. What started as carrying trays and setting up tables evolved into helping coordinate staff and troubleshooting last-minute issues. My boss Darren noticed how I could anticipate problems before they happened and started giving me more responsibility. By junior year, I was helping plan smaller events from concept to execution. Meanwhile, things at home continued deteriorating. During winter break of sophomore year, I discovered Janet had converted our family attic storage into a gym, discarding boxes of holiday decorations my mother had collected over the years. When I confronted her about a particular ornament collection that had been in Mom's family for generations, she shrugged it off. Those old things were collecting dust and probably full of mold. I did everyone a favor. I salvaged what I could, storing precious mementos at my friend Jordan's house to protect them from Janet's purges. Each visit home revealed more changes, more erasures of our past. Kyle, then 14, seemed oblivious to it all, or perhaps he had simply accepted this new reality as normal. The final straw came during Thanksgiving break of junior year. While looking for an old photo album to show my girlfriend Taylor, who had joined me for the holiday, I discovered Janet had cleared out the hall closet where we kept family memorabilia. The album's home videos and keepsake box, containing Mom's handwritten recipes, were gone. When I asked Janet about them, she casually mentioned Shed donated all that clutter during spring cleaning. My heart sank as I realized the last tangible connections to my mother's voice and handwriting were gone forever. In that moment, something broke inside me. "How could you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Those weren't yours to throw away." Janet looked offended. "I live here too, Zachary. This isn't a shrine to the past. It's my home now. Those were irreplaceable pieces of our history," I said, struggling to control my anger. They were all Kyle and I had left of Mom. Dad entered the kitchen immediately, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" Before I could explain, Janet was in tears, claiming I had verbally attacked her for trying to keep a clean house. Dad put his arm around her protectively. "You need to apologize to your mother right now," he demanded. The word mother ignited something in me. "She's not my mother," I said quietly but firmly. "And she had no right to throw away Mom's things without asking Kyle or me." Dad's face hardened. "That's enough. Janet has been nothing but good to this family. And this is how you repay her. With disrespect and ingratitude." "Good to this family," I echoed in disbelief. "She's been systematically erasing Mom from our lives since the day she moved in. And you've let her do it." The argument escalated quickly. Janet crying, Dad shouting, and me finally releasing years of pent-up frustration and grief. Taylor retreated to the guest room while Kyle watched wide-eyed from the staircase, witnessing the implosion of our family's facade. Finally, Dad delivered his ultimatum. "As long as you live under my roof, and I pay for your education, you will respect Janet as your mother and follow her rules. If you can't do that, you're on your own." The choice was clear. "Then I guess I'm on my own," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. That night, Taylor and I packed my belongings and drove back to campus. Dad canceled my tuition payment for the upcoming semester and removed me from our family cell phone plan the next day. Just like that, I was financially cut off and essentially homeless once the dorms closed for winter break. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. I increased my work hours at both jobs, applied for emergency financial aid, and moved into a tiny apartment with 3 roommates to save on rent. Some days I survived on ramen and coffee, studying in the library until closing because we couldn't afford adequate heating. But somehow I never missed a class or assignment. Professor Williams from my business communications course became an unexpected ally. After I fell asleep during his lecture following a double shift, he called me to his office. Instead of reprimanding me, he listened to my situation and connected me with alumni who offered additional catering work. He also helped me refine my resume and introduced me to contacts in the event planning industry. "You have a rare combination of creativity and practical problem solving," he told me. "Don't let your current circumstances define your future." Despite everything, I graduated with honors. Dad and Janet didn't attend the ceremony, though Kyle sent a congratulatory text that I suspected he had to hide from them. As I moved my tassel from right to left, I felt both profound loss and unexpected freedom. The family I knew was gone. But for the first time, my future belonged entirely to me. Post-graduation life hit hard and fast. My student housing ended, and I found myself sharing a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in a questionable neighborhood with 2 other guys. We rotated sleeping on the single bed, pull-out couch, and air mattress, creating a calendar on the refrigerator to keep track. The bathroom was barely large enough to turn around in, and the kitchen consisted of a mini fridge, microwave, and hot plate. I landed an entry-level position at Coastal Events, a small company that handled local business functions and modest social gatherings. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but it offered experience and a foot in the door. To make ends meet, I also waited tables at Angelo's Italian restaurant 4 nights a week, often working until midnight before waking at 6 for my day job. At Coastal Events, I started at the very bottom. I organized supply closets, ran errands for planners, answered phones, and compiled client information packets. No task was too small or menial. I absorbed everything, watching how the senior planners handled client meetings, negotiated with vendors, and managed budgets. During lunch breaks, I studied event planning books and online resources, creating a binder of ideas, contacts, and strategies. 6 months in, an opportunity arose when a junior planner quit unexpectedly before a corporate product launch event. The client was small but demanding, and no one else wanted to take on the additional work. I volunteered, promising my supervisor, Patricia, that I wouldn't let the company down. That first event tested everything I had learned. Working with a limited budget and tight timeline, I negotiated with vendors I had befriended through my catering days, called in favors for last-minute rentals, and stayed up all night, creating custom decorations that aligned with the client's brand. The morning of the event, I arrived 3 hours early to oversee every detail of the setup. The product launch exceeded expectations. The client specifically mentioned the creative touches and seamless execution in their thank you email to Patricia. While she took most of the credit, she did acknowledge my contribution and assigned me a few smaller clients of my own. Each event built my confidence and contact list. I kept detailed records of every vendor, venue, and service provider I worked with, noting their strengths, pricing flexibility, and reliability. I created a personal database of resources that would prove invaluable later. It was during a charity gala that I met Sarah Chen, a talented chef who had recently started her own boutique catering company. We connected immediately, sharing frustrations about the industry and dreams of doing things differently. Sarah had an incredible culinary vision, but struggled with the business and logistical aspects of events. I offered advice on streamlining her operation in exchange for discounted catering for my smaller clients. This partnership benefited us both. Sarah's extraordinary food elevated my events, while my organizational skills and growing client base kept her calendar full. We began to imagine what we could accomplish if we combined our talents officially. After 2 years at Coastal Events, I had hit a ceiling. Patricia made it clear that without a proper degree in hospitality management or family connections, advancement opportunities were limited. The final straw came when I brought in a potential major client who specifically requested to work with me, only to have Patricia reassign them to her nephew who had just joined the company. Sarah and I spent countless evenings at her small commercial kitchen, drinking coffee and mapping out plans for our own company on the back of order forms and napkins. We calculated startup costs, drafted business plans, and brainstormed company names. With our combined savings plus a small business loan secured through Professor Williams' recommendation, Premier Events was born. The early days of entrepreneurship tested our resolve daily. We operated from a tiny office above a sandwich shop, using folding tables as desks and storing supplies in every available corner. Our first few events were small office parties and modest weddings, with Sarah and me handling everything from client consultations to day of setup and teardown. Not every event was a success. A Sweet 16 party nearly ended in disaster when the venue's power went out mid-celebration. A corporate retreat faced last-minute venue cancellation due to flooding. Each crisis taught valuable lessons and forced creative problem-solving that distinguished us from larger, more rigid companies. Our breakthrough came unexpectedly through a wedding client whose father happened to be the CEO of a regional banking chain. Impressed by our personalized approach and grace under pressure, when the flower delivery arrived completely wrong, he hired us for the bank's annual Client Appreciation Gala. This high-profile event put Premier Events on the map, leading to referrals and opportunities previously beyond our reach. 5 years passed in what felt like both an eternity and an instant. Premier Events grew from just Sarah and me to a team of 15 full-time staff, plus a roster of reliable part-time workers. We moved into proper offices, developed a distinctive brand identity, and became known for creating memorable experiences tailored to each client's unique vision. Throughout this period, my contact with family remained minimal. I sent Kyle birthday and Christmas cards that sometimes received brief responses. Dad and I exchanged stiff, formal emails a few times a year, mostly related to family matters that required my knowledge or input. We attempted one disastrous dinner when I was home for a client meeting, which ended with Janet criticizing my career choice as glorified party planning and questioning when I would get a real job with benefits. The distance hurt, but I had built a new family among friends and colleagues who supported my goals and celebrated my successes. Sarah became the sister I never had, while Professor Williams continued mentoring me through regular lunch meetings and honest advice. Then out of the blue, Kyle called. His voice sounded different, more mature than I remembered. At 24, he had graduated college and started his career at an accounting firm where he met Melissa, his girlfriend of 2 years. They had just gotten engaged, and he wanted me to hear it from him directly. "I'd really like you to be at the wedding, Zach," he said hesitantly. "As my best man, actually." I was speechless, simultaneously thrilled and terrified. Being Kyle's best man would mean unavoidable interaction with Dad and Janet reopening wounds I had worked hard to heal. "I know things are complicated," Kyle continued, "but you're my brother. It wouldn't feel right without you standing beside me." How could I refuse? Despite everything, Kyle was still the little boy I had promised to protect in that hospital room all those years ago. I agreed, not realizing this decision would set in motion events that would change all our lives. 2 weeks after accepting the best man role, Kyle invited me to dinner with him and Melissa. As we settled into a corner booth at an upscale restaurant I had actually worked at during college, Kyle seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting with his silverware and avoiding eye contact. "There's something else I wanted to ask you," he finally said after we ordered. "It's about the wedding planning." Melissa, a poised woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, reached for his hand supportively. "Dad and Janet want us to use this wedding planner Janet knows from her country club," Kyle explained. "But we've seen their work, and it's just not what we envision. It's all very traditional," boring Melissa clarified with a small smile. "Cookie cutter and pretentious. We want something more personal," Kyle continued. "Something that actually feels like us. And, well, I know you work in event planning now, so I thought maybe." My heart raced as I realized what he was asking. "You want me to plan your wedding?" "If it's not too awkward," Kyle said quickly. "As my brother, not as a hired service. We'd still pay whoever needs to be paid for catering and all that." I took a sip of water, considering the implications. Planning Kyle's wedding would mean regular contact with Dad and Janet, who would undoubtedly try to control every aspect of the event. It would mean putting my professional reputation on the line in a highly emotional family situation. "My parents are covering most of the costs," Melissa added. "They're pretty reasonable people and want us to be happy with the planning process." The opportunity to repair my relationship with Kyle and potentially showcase my company's capabilities to Melissa's apparently wealthy family was tempting. But more importantly, I saw genuine hope in my brother's eyes. "I'd be honored," I said finally, "but there's something you should know. I don't just work in event planning. I co-own an event planning company." Kyle's jaw dropped. "Seriously? You own a company?" I nodded, unable to suppress a small, proud smile. "Premier Events. We've been in business for 5 years now." "Wait," Melissa interjected, eyes widening. "Premier Events planned my cousin's wedding last year in Newport Beach. Everyone is still talking about it. That's your company." I couldn't help but laugh at the coincidence. "Small world." "This is perfect," Kyle exclaimed. "Now Dad and Janet can't possibly object. We'll be using a legitimate, successful company that happens to be owned by family." I wasn't so optimistic about their reaction, but kept those thoughts to myself. We spent the rest of dinner discussing their vision for the wedding, and I was genuinely impressed by their ideas. They wanted something elegant, but unconventional, with personal touches reflecting their journey together. The initial planning meeting with Melissa's parents, Thomas and Catherine Edwards, took place at their impressive home in Beverly Hills. Thomas, a successful investment banker, was direct and business-minded. Catherine, a former interior designer, had an eye for aesthetics and detail. Both were surprisingly down-to-earth, given their obvious wealth. I arrived professionally dressed with a portfolio of our previous events, prepared to present myself as Premier Events representative rather than just Kyle's brother. The distinction became immediately important when Dad and Janet unexpectedly joined the meeting. Janet's face tightened upon seeing me. "What's he doing here?" she asked Kyle sharply. Before Kyle could respond, Thomas Edwards extended his hand to me. "You must be Zachary." Melissa has told us about your company. We're interested to hear your thoughts on the wedding. There must be some misunderstanding, Janet interrupted. We've already discussed using Patricia at elegant occasions. She's done several events for friends at the club. Actually, Melissa said firmly, Kyle and I want to use premier events. They align better with our vision. Dad frowned, looking between Janet and me. I wasn't aware Zachary was involved with this company. He's just an employee, correct? The dismissive tone stung, but I maintained my professional demeanor. I'm co-owner and creative director of Premier Events. We specialize in personalized celebrations that reflect our clients' unique stories. I opened my portfolio, directing my presentation primarily to the Edwards, while including Kyle and Melissa. As I showed photos and described our approach to event design, Thomas asked thoughtful questions about logistics and budgeting. Catherine was particularly impressed by our attention to meaningful details in previous weddings. Janet attempted several times to steer the conversation toward her preferred vendor, mentioning concerns about conflicts of interest and suggesting that family should be guests, not service providers. Each time, Thomas politely acknowledged her input before returning to his questions for me. The dynamic shifted dramatically when Thomas recognized one of our corporate events in my portfolio. You handled the Westridge Financial Annual Gala last year, he asked, leaning forward with interest. Yes, we've managed it for the past 3 years, I confirmed. I attended that event. The execution was flawless. He turned to Catherine. Remember I told you about the ice sculpture that transformed throughout the evening? That was apparently Zachary's company. Janet's expression soured further as Thomas continued praising our work. Dad remained mostly silent, watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. By the end of the meeting, Thomas made his decision clear. We'd like to proceed with Premier Events, assuming you have availability for the date we're considering. But Richard Janet protested to my father, surely you see the awkwardness of this arrangement. Dad cleared his throat. Perhaps we should consider a more established company. Someone with more experience handling events of this caliber. Thomas Edwards raised an eyebrow. From what I've seen and heard, Premier Events is more than qualified. Unless there's a specific concern about their professional capabilities, Dad had no response that wouldn't sound personally motivated. Reluctantly, he conceded, though the tight line of his mouth indicated this wasn't the end of the discussion. After the meeting, I pulled Kyle aside. This could get complicated. Are you sure you want me involved? Kyle nodded firmly. More than ever. Did you see how they tried to take over? This is exactly why we need someone we trust in charge. To minimize family tension, I suggested a compromise. My business partner Sarah would serve as the primary contact for the family, while I would oversee the planning behind the scenes. This arrangement satisfied everyone except Janet, who continued sending helpful suggestions and vendor recommendations to Sarah almost daily. The next 6 months involved intricate planning for what was shaping up to be an exceptional wedding. Melissa and Kyle chose a stunning vineyard estate for their late spring ceremony and reception. The guest list grew to 500 people, including business associates of both families and numerous social connections from the Edwards circle. Throughout the process, I added personal touches I knew would matter to Kyle. I tracked down a replica of our mother's favorite flower to include in the ceremony arrangements. I suggested a first dance song that had special meaning in our childhood. I even found a way to incorporate subtle nods to Kyle's passion for astronomy in the reception decor. Janet's interference escalated as the wedding approached. She demanded changes to the menu, questioned the choice of photographer, and even attempted to reschedule vendor meetings to times she knew I would be unavailable. Sarah handled these challenges with diplomatic grace, while I focused on ensuring the event would be everything Kyle and Melissa wanted. 2 weeks before the wedding, Janet made her most aggressive move, yet contacting our rental company directly to change the table and chair selections we had carefully chosen with the couple. I learned about it when the confused vendor called to confirm the unexpected modifications. Rather than engaging in direct conflict, I invited Kyle and Melissa to the warehouse to personally select between the original choices and Janet's suggestions. When they firmly preferred our initial selections, I gently suggested Kyle should be the one to communicate this to Janet. "This is your wedding," I reminded him. "Your preferences should take priority." Kyle nodded, a new determination in his eyes. "You're right. It's time I started standing up for what Melissa and I want." That small victory gave me hope that the wedding itself might proceed without major drama. I should have known better. The morning of Kyle and Melissa's wedding arrived with perfect weather and military precision logistics. Our team began setup at 5 a.m., transforming the already beautiful vineyard estate into something truly magical. Crystal chandeliers were suspended from ancient oak trees. Custom wooden signs guided guests along lavender-lined paths. A string quartet rehearsed beneath a flower-adorned pergola where the ceremony would take place. I supervised everything from a distance, dressed in my best man attire, but functioning as event director until the ceremony. My earpiece buzzed constantly with updates and questions from staff. The caterers, photographers, florists, and technical team all reported directly to me, while Sarah managed the guest experience aspects. Kyle found me adjusting lighting in the reception tent around noon, looking handsome but nervous in his tailored suit. "This is incredible, Zach," he said, taking in the transformation. "I can't believe this is all happening." For a moment, we were just brothers again. I straightened his tie and gripped his shoulders. "Mom would be so proud of the man you've become." His eyes misted slightly. "Do you think she'd approve of Melissa?" "She'd adore her," I assured him. "Strong kind doesn't take any nonsense from Janet. Mom would consider that a winning combination." We both laughed, and something tight in my chest loosened slightly. "Listen," Kyle said, suddenly serious. "Whatever happens today with Dad and Janet, I want you to know how much it means to have you here, both as my brother and the genius behind all this." I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "Just focus on marrying the love of your life today. Everything else is background noise." We embraced briefly before being interrupted by the photographer wanting pre-ceremony shots with the groom. I returned to my event director role, checking final details before changing hats to best man. The ceremony was breathtaking. Melissa appeared at the end of the aisle looking radiant, and Kyle's face as he saw her approach was worth every minute of planning. I stood proudly beside my brother, acutely aware of Dad and Janet in the front row. Dad seemed uncharacteristically emotional, while Janet maintained her usual controlled expression, occasionally frowning at decorative elements she hadn't approved. After the perfect exchange of vows, guests moved to the cocktail garden while the wedding party completed photographs. Everything was running flawlessly. Staff executed each transition exactly as planned, and the weather remained ideal as the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting a golden glow over the property. As guests entered the reception tent for dinner, audible gasps and exclamations of delight echoed through the space. The transformation from empty tent to enchanted evening garden had exceeded even my expectations. Thousands of twinkling lights created the illusion of stars overhead. Each table featured unique centerpieces reflecting different aspects of Kyle and Melissa's relationship. The head table included subtle tributes to family traditions from both sides, including a small framed photo of our mother tucked among the flowers. I noticed Dad staring at the photo during dinner, his expression unreadable. Janet whispered something to him, and his face hardened as he looked in my direction. I busied myself with best man duties, checking with Sarah about timeline adjustments and ensuring the vendors were prepared for upcoming elements. The reception progressed beautifully through dinner and toasts. I delivered a heartfelt speech about Kyle that earned both laughter and tears, carefully avoiding any mentions of family tension. Melissa's father, Thomas, approached me afterward, clapping me on the shoulder. "Exceptional work on everything," he said warmly. "I'm impressed by your attention to detail and how personal everything feels." "Thank you, sir. That's exactly what we aim for at Premier." "We should talk business sometime," he suggested. "I sit on several boards that regularly host events. They could benefit from your approach." As we exchanged contact information, I noticed Dad watching from across the room, his expression darkening as he emptied another glass of scotch. Janet stood beside him, whispering urgently in his ear while glaring in my direction. The potential confrontation I had been dreading all day finally materialized shortly after the cake cutting. I was directing the catering staff about dessert service when Dad approached, slightly unsteady from alcohol. "So this is what you've been doing all these years," he said loudly, drawing attention from nearby guests. "Playing party planner." I maintained my professional demeanor. "Good evening, Dad. Is there something I can help you with?" "You can help by explaining why you thought it appropriate to turn your brother's wedding into a showcase for your little business," he slurred slightly. "Janet says you've been undermining her input from the beginning." I lowered my voice. "Kyle and Melissa chose our company because they liked our work. Every decision has been approved by them." "Always the clever one with your answers," he scoffed. "Your mother coddled you too much, made you think you were special." The mention of Mom sent a cold wave through me, but I remained calm. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. Today is about Kyle and Melissa. "Don't tell me what this day is about," he said, voice rising. "I paid for half of it." Actually, the Edwards covered most costs. I corrected quietly, immediately regretting my words. Dad's face flushed dark red. Several guests were now openly watching our exchange. Janet appeared at his side, placing a possessive hand on his arm. "Richard, he's just trying to provoke you," she said loudly enough for others to hear. "He's always been jealous of our relationship." I took a step back, ready to extract myself from the situation. "I need to check on the band for the first dance. Excuse me." As I turned to leave, Dad grabbed my arm roughly. "Don't you walk away when I'm talking to you." "Please let go of my arm," I said evenly. "You think you're so much better than us with your fancy company and your connections." He continued, tightening his grip. "Parading around here, showing off to Melissa's family. You've always been an ungrateful, disrespectful—" "Dad, that's enough," I interrupted, firmly, acutely aware of the growing audience. "Let's talk tomorrow when you're sober." His face contorted with rage. "How dare you speak to me that way?" What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Dad's open palm connected with my cheek in a slap that echoed through the suddenly silent tent. 500 guests froze mid-conversation, mid-bite, mid-sip. "You're a disgrace," he spat. "You always have been." The sting on my face was nothing compared to the burning humiliation. Every eye in the room was on us. Kyle stood frozen halfway across the tent. Melissa's hand clutched in his. Janet looked smugly satisfied behind Dad's shoulder. I could have reacted in countless ways. I could have shouted back, returned the slap, created an even bigger scene. Instead, I straightened my tie, looked my father directly in the eye, and said nothing. Without breaking eye contact, I reached into my pocket, removed my phone, and pressed a single number on speed dial. "Sarah," I said calmly when she answered. "Initiate Protocol Delta, please." I put my phone away, nodded once at my father, and walked calmly toward the exit. Sarah received my call and immediately understood. Protocol Delta was our emergency contingency plan developed after a client once threatened not to pay after an event. It was a systematic, orderly shutdown and removal of all our equipment, supplies, and personnel. Within 30 seconds of my call, the music faded to silence. The ambient lighting slowly dimmed. Servers paused mid-service, quietly returning food to trays. Bar staff capped bottles and began packing glasses. Behind the scenes, our crew began efficiently dismantling sound equipment, packing centerpieces, and rolling up rented linens. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd as the magical atmosphere we had created began methodically disappearing. Melissa's father, Thomas, intercepted me near the exit. "What's happening?" he demanded, concern evident in his voice. "I apologize for the inconvenience, Mr. Edwards," I replied professionally. "But Premier Events cannot continue service in an environment where our staff is subjected to verbal abuse and physical assault." "I saw what happened," he acknowledged grimly. "Your father was out of line. But surely we can resolve this without disrupting the entire reception. Unfortunately, our contract includes a non-negotiable clause about respectful treatment of our team," I explained. "I'm simply following company policy." This wasn't entirely true. We had such a clause, but it had never been invoked before. Still, I maintained my composed facade as I watched realization dawn on Thomas's face. "You're the owner," he said, connecting the dots. "Premier Events is your company." "Co-owner," I corrected. "My business partner, Sarah, handles the operational side." Thomas ran a hand through his silver hair, processing this information. "And your family doesn't know?" "They never asked," I said simply. By now, Kyle had pushed through the confused guests to reach us, Melissa at his side. "Zach, what's going on?" he asked, panic edging his voice. "Why is everything shutting down?" "I'm sorry, Kyle," I said sincerely, "but after what just happened, my company needs to withdraw our services." "Your company," he repeated, confusion clear on his face. "Premier Events." Melissa explained quickly to her bewildered groom. "It's Zachary's company." Kyle's mouth opened and closed without sound. Before he could gather his thoughts, Dad and Janet arrived. Janet clutching Dad's arm supportively, while he swayed slightly. "What kind of stunt are you pulling now?" Janet demanded. "Turn everything back on immediately." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," I replied calmly. "I'll have you fired for this," Dad threatened, pointing an unsteady finger at me. "I'll call your boss right now." A small, sad smile crossed my face. "That won't be necessary, Dad. I am the boss. Premier Events is my company." The color drained from his face as the implication sank in. Janet's expression shifted from smug superiority to shocked disbelief. "That's impossible," she stammered. "You're just an employee. You said you worked in event planning." "I do work in event planning," I confirmed. As the owner and creative director of one of the most sought-after event companies in Southern California, Thomas Edwards stepped forward, assuming the role of mediator. "Richard, your son has built an impressive business. Everyone I've spoken with tonight has raved about the exceptional quality of this event." Dad seemed temporarily at a loss for words, an unusual state for a man accustomed to commanding rooms. "If you fired his company, who's paying for all this?" Janet asked, suddenly, financial concerns apparently foremost in her mind. "The contract was with the Edwards family," I explained. "The early termination clause means you'll receive a partial refund for services not completed." "This is ridiculous," Janet sputtered. "You can't just stop a wedding reception. What about the dancing, the send-off, all the traditions?" "Perhaps you should have considered that before Richard publicly assaulted a vendor," Thomas replied coolly. Kyle, who had been processing everything in stunned silence, finally found his voice. "All these years you let me believe you were struggling, Zach. Why didn't you tell me about your success? Would it have mattered?" I asked gently. "Would Dad and Janet have treated me any differently if they knew I owned a company instead of just working for one?" Kyle's gaze shifted to our father, who was beginning to look less angry and more devastated as the reality of the situation became clear. "You've ruined your brother's wedding. Dad accused weakly. Was that your plan all along? Revenge? No, Dad. I wanted to give Kyle and Melissa the perfect day. Every detail was planned with love. I turned to the couple. I'm truly sorry it's ending this way. We'll pay whatever it costs. To continue, Janet interjected, reaching for her purse. Name your price. I regarded her sadly. You still don't understand. This was never about money. You can't buy respect, Janet. You have to earn it. Around us, the systematic dismantling of the reception continued. Guests awkwardly gathered their belongings, some shooting sympathetic glances toward Kyle and Melissa, others openly gawking at the family drama unfolding. Dad suddenly seemed to deflate, the combined effects of alcohol and realization making him appear older and smaller. All this time, he murmured almost to himself. All this time you were building something significant, and I never knew. You never asked, I repeated softly. You chose your path, Dad. I chose mine. I turned to Kyle and Melissa, genuine regret in my voice. I had contingency plans for weather vendor issues, even medical emergencies. I never planned for this. I'm sorry your celebration is ending this way. To my surprise, Melissa stepped forward and hugged me. Thank you for everything you did create, she whispered. It was magical while it lasted. Kyle's reaction was more complex, conflict evident in his expression as he looked between me and our father. I didn't envy his position torn between family loyalties. I'll have the gifts and personal items delivered to your home tomorrow, I promised, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze before turning to leave. As I walked away, Sarah met me at the exit, concern in her eyes. Are you okay? She asked quietly. No, I admitted, but I will be. Make sure the team gets everything packed up properly. And double their pay for tonight. I spent the next few hours at company headquarters, helping staff unload equipment and check inventory. Many worked in somber silence. Others offered supportive words or gestures. They had witnessed their leader being publicly humiliated and had executed the shutdown with professional precision. Their loyalty meant more than they could know. Around midnight, my phone rang with Kyle's number. I hesitated before answering. Hey, I said tentatively. That was quite an exit strategy, he said, his tone unreadable. Kyle, I'm so sorry about. Don't, he interrupted. Don't apologize for standing up for yourself. I should have done it years ago, too. Relief flooded through me. Are you and Melissa okay? We're fine. Her parents took everyone to their country club for an impromptu after-party. Dad and Janet left right after you did. He paused. Why didn't you ever tell me about your company, Zach? I sighed, leaning against a stack of folded tables. At first it was too new, too fragile to talk about. Then it became successful, and I guess I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, or worse, that you'd tell Dad and Janet, and they'd find some way to diminish it. I get that, he said after a moment. But no more secrets, okay? I want my brother back in my life. The real version. Not some watered-down, self-censored version. Deal, I agreed, feeling a weight lift from my chest. No more secrets. The weeks following Kyle's wedding brought unexpected developments. Rather than damaging our company's reputation, the incident seemed to enhance it. Guests who witnessed the confrontation spread the story through their social circles, emphasizing my professional restraint in the face of personal attack. Several inquiries specifically mentioned admiration for our principled business practices and refusal to tolerate abuse. Thomas Edwards became not just a client, but a mentor and investor. Over lunch, 3 weeks after the wedding, he offered to back an expansion of premier events. Integrity is rare in business, he explained. You demonstrated yours in the most difficult circumstances imaginable. That's someone I want to invest in. With Thomas's backing, we opened a second office in San Francisco and expanded our corporate event division. Sarah focused on operations while I handled creative direction and client relationships. Our staff doubled, then tripled, within 6 months. Kyle and Melissa created a relationship with me separate from the rest of the family. We had dinner regularly, and I helped them furnish their new home with contacts from the design world. Melissa jokingly referred to the wedding incident as the reception that became legend, finding humor in what had been a painful experience. People still talk about it, she admitted during one dinner. But they always focus on how magical everything was before the drama. You should be proud of what you created, even if it didn't last the whole night. Dad and Janet remained distant initially. I heard through Kyle that Janet had joined a different country club after rumors circulated at her previous one. Dad had apparently reduced his drinking significantly, which Kyle attributed to embarrassment over his behavior at the wedding. The unexpected knock on my office door came 6 months after the wedding. My assistant Megan appeared looking uncomfortable. "There's someone here to see you," she said hesitantly. "Richard Miller. He says he's your father." My heart raced as I considered how to respond. Part of me wanted to refuse the meeting to protect myself from further hurt. But another part recognized this might be an opportunity for closure, if nothing else. Send him in, I decided. Dad entered tentatively, looking older and somehow diminished compared to my memories. His expensive suit hung slightly loose on his frame, and his confident stride had been replaced by a more measured gait. "Your office is impressive," he said after an awkward moment of silence. "The whole building is." "Thank you," I replied, remaining seated behind my desk. "Would you like to sit?" He nodded, lowering himself into one of the client chairs. His eyes moved around the room, taking in the awards displayed on shelves, the framed photos of notable events we had produced, the view of the city from my corner office. "You've built something remarkable," he said finally. I had no idea. "You never asked," I said for the third time, but without the bitterness that had accompanied the words at the wedding. "No, I didn't," he acknowledged. "I made assumptions instead. That was unfair of me." The admission, small as it was, felt significant, coming from a man who rarely acknowledged mistakes. "Kyle tells me your company is expanding," he continued. "That must be exciting." "It is," I confirmed, still uncertain where this conversation was heading. "We're opening our third location in Chicago next month." Dad nodded, a hint of pride flickering across his face, before being replaced by something that looked surprisingly like shame. "I owe you an apology, Zachary," he said, the words seeming physically difficult for him to produce. "Not just for the wedding, but for years before that. I failed you as a father." I remained silent, unwilling to offer easy absolution. "After your mother died," he continued, "I was lost. Janet seemed like a lifeline, someone who could make decisions when I couldn't bear to. I let her take control because it was easier than facing my grief." He paused, collecting himself. "But I should never have let her come between us. I should have protected your connection to your mother's memory." "Yes, you should have," I agreed quietly. "Why are you here now, Dad?" He looked down at his hands, twisting his wedding ring. "Janet and I are separating. Actually, we're divorcing. It's been a long time coming, but what happened at the wedding forced me to reevaluate many things." This was unexpected news. Despite everything, I had trouble imagining Dad without Janet after all these years. "I'm not here to burden you with my problems," he clarified. "And I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just thought you deserved to know that I recognize my failures and I'm trying to do better, starting with Kyle." I'm glad to hear that, I said honestly. "Kyle deserves a father who puts him first." Dad nodded, accepting the implicit criticism. "And so did you." The past tense hung in the air between us, acknowledging what we both knew. The time when I needed a father's protection and guidance had passed. I had built my life without him. "Would you consider," he asked hesitantly, "meeting occasionally? Perhaps for lunch. I'd like to get to know the man you've become." I considered his request carefully. Part of me wanted to refuse to protect the life and emotional stability I had worked so hard to build. But another part recognized that continuing to shut him out completely would mean allowing the past to determine my future actions. "I think we could try lunch," I said finally. "Not regularly, at least not at first. But we can start there and see what happens." Relief washed over his face. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." As he stood to leave, he paused by the door. "Your mother would be incredibly proud of you, Zachary, not just for your success, but for the strength of character it took to build it in the face of obstacles I placed in your way." After he left, I sat quietly in my office processing the unexpected conversation. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, nor complete reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement of harm done, and a tentative step toward a new kind of relationship. Whether that relationship would develop into something meaningful remained to be seen. Over the following year, Dad and I established a cautious pattern of monthly lunches. Our conversations gradually became less formal and strained. He took a genuine interest in my business, occasionally offering legal insights from his corporate background that proved valuable. I learned about his childhood and early career in ways I never had before. We developed, if not the father-son relationship of my youth, then a respectful adult connection based on who we were now rather than who we had been. My relationship with Kyle deepened as well, no longer shadowed by family secrets or divided loyalties. He and Melissa announced their pregnancy at Thanksgiving dinner, hosted at my home with Dad present, but subdued. The joy on Kyle's face, as he showed us ultrasound photos, reminded me of the little boy who had once looked at me with similar excitement over a new toy or discovery. Premier events continued to thrive, expanding to 5 locations nationwide within 3 years of the wedding incident. Sarah and I developed a reputation for creating meaningful experiences rather than just logistically sound events. We specialized in telling clients' stories through thoughtful details and personalized touches, much as I had tried to do for Kyle and Melissa. The journey from rejected son to successful business owner taught me lessons I could never have learned otherwise. I discovered my own resilience, the value of chosen family, and the freedom that comes from standing firmly in your truth. I learned that success is the best response to doubt, and that dignity in the face of cruelty is a power no one can take away. Most importantly, I learned that respect cannot be demanded through intimidation or obligation. True respect is earned through integrity, consistency, and treating others with the dignity everyone deserves. My father tried to force my respect through financial control and punishment. In the end, it was his respect I gained through building something meaningful on my own terms. Looking back, I wouldn't change the painful path that led me here. Each struggle and setback shaped the person I've become and the business I've built. The company that began from necessity has become a creative outlet and source of pride I might never have discovered otherwise. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when family let you down, or found unexpected strength when facing your biggest challenges? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes our most difficult moments lead to our greatest transformations. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your way through family conflicts. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the family that truly matters is the one that treats you with love and respect, whether they're related by blood or by choice.